Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. Today I'm going to talk about a new project that we have that we're working to introduce. It's our first project. Basically what we're doing is it is called the Olive Pope. And I've talked about it a little bit before in previous videos. The Olive Pope is one of our projects that goes with the Catholic Church in America project. The reason that we have a project like this is because the Catholic Church is dealing with some issues that are very, very difficult for them to resolve. They can't resolve. There's two of them, and that cannot be resolved from within the church. This afternoon, I came across an article on the internet saying that Pope Francis was saying that he's responsible for dealing with the sexual abuse crisis in the church, that he's going to deal with that. It's impossible for him to deal with that within the church. And basically he's setting himself up for a crisis, a deeper crisis, because he's not responsible for dealing with it. I am. And the reason for that is because I am a prophet, and you could say that the Catholic Church in America project is the solution for him, not for him to deal with that. In a way, I'm standing up to defend him from this problem. And the reason I can do that is because let's say that in the Catholic Church, they declared that the popes are chosen from God, and in a way that is so. I'm not going to dispute that, but the cardinals are the ones who make the choice about who's going to be the next pope, and a lot of times, and it can be let's say an abuse of power idea, and that is what happened with Benedict the 16th. He grabbed for power. He wasn't doing the work that was required of him to do as the Pope, and that is the idea of taking on the sins. Okay, it's a spiritual tool that you use, where you change what's inside of yourself, and then you shift by making one change in yourself, you can affect everything, because we're all connected. Okay, so when Pope Francis declared that he was going to assume responsibility, there isn't any way he can do that, because the two crises, one is the sexual abuse by the priests, and the other one is acts of terrorism that came as a result of the Crusades during the Middle Ages. So these are both sins, and it's not up to him to absolve people of their sins. It's like inside the church, he cannot absolve people of their sins. It's not up to him. The priests who are doing this are not standing up and declaring themselves to be, like in confession, declaring themselves that they would like forgiveness. They're not asking for forgiveness. They're weaving an illusion, and they're working. They've the sin associated with sexual abuse is the sin of lust, and the one associated with the Crusades is the sin of anger and denying people a voice. So let's say that you take, and let's say an act of revenge, and you have, as I've talked about that before, there are 5 power games associated with revenge. So we're looking at in the same thing that's happening to the United States and many other countries, like Ukraine and and all over the world, it's revenge and it is hostile takeovers as the world leaders are jockeying for power to see who will be the next superpower. When we look at, for example, what's happening with Donald Trump and wondering if he will ever be indicted, he has this huge structure around himself that he's built, that where people are going to uphold him and they're going to defend him, and they're going to be like this wall around him that allows him to do whatever he chooses to do. In fact, he had the audacity to say that, to declare that Biden is an enemy of the state, and it's kind of like the president of the United States and is the enemy of the state, and he's doing his constitutional responsibilities. So here we have, let's say, to step back one more step with what's happening in the church, the Catholic Church, and then in the United States, we're looking at the overview idea of hostile takeovers. When I've talked about our exit strategy for Iraq, the United States was perpetrating, you could say, a hostile takeover of Iraq, and then had this big, huge power structure that was built like a character defamation campaign around this. When people sue for character defamation and it's just, well, you said something nasty about me, that's not, it might be something that the Department of Justice will deal with or whatever, or, but most of the times there's not enough, let's say, power or structure behind that to prove it. It's more like opinions or something like that. But with character defamation, it's an active, it's 5 power games that are coming together, people playing the 5 games, and they are creating this structure around themselves. In fact, another article that I came across today was that it was in Israel, and there 2 people were shot for being collaborators. The Palestinians were shot for being collaborators with Israel. And you were looking at this idea of an illusion about genocides and about character defamation, and it's really hard to unravel those ideas. So it's not up to Pope Francis, to deal with this situation. It's not his responsibility. It's mine. And the reason for it is because my exit strategy for Iraq proposal addresses this idea about hostile takeovers and revenge, how it works and why it doesn't work. So this first this first project that we have has to do with the idea of the Olive Pope and the Catholic Church in America project, and then also this idea of addressing these issues that we have. So in other words, I'm a prophet, and when I was watching the funeral of Pope John Paul II, I was just like, I remember seeing him on the beer, or however you pronounce it, beer, and as his body was there, I was just like everybody else wondering who was going to be the next pope, what the cardinals were going to do, watching for the smoke coming out of the chimney, that kind of thing. When at his funeral, I was sitting and watching, and Pope John Paul II came to me and told me that I was going to be the next pope. I thought, no way, this is just somebody playing games on me. And the reason he said no, he said, God is, you are basically being chosen from the prophets because the next pope that's coming in is not going to be doing what he's supposed to do. It's a grab for power. So when that happened, Pope Benedict XVI basically grabbed for power. He was able to create this structure around himself, and then but he didn't understand it because it was a grab for power. He, like Donald Trump, a grab for power. He wasn't doing the job of the Pope, and Donald Trump hasn't been doing the job of the president. It's like I think of Pope Benedict XVI as the in extremis president, the Pope, based on the St. Malachy's prophecies for the last 112 popes after him. He was born in the 1100s, 11 to 1200s, in that time period. And then I consider Donald Trump to be the in extremis president, because he grabbed for power and he was functioning outside of his capacity, just as Pope Benedict XVI was. He was functioning outside of his capacity. He may have sat and watched the Pope function for years and years and years, but he didn't understand the principles associated with being a pope. And that is, you assume responsibility, but you also take on the sins of the world. And that's one of the spiritual tools that you use to change things, not by making a decree necessarily, but by changing inside of you. So Pope Francis is actually the first pope of the new cycle, and he's setting the principles for the faith of the Pure, which is to unify all the world's religions into this school idea, the faith of the Pure. We've talked about that, and which teaches people how to create the life they want. And also it's the idea of, let's say, helping with immigration. I've talked about that. But it's also the idea of understanding the principles that each of the 7 major religions teaches, and then it brings together all the 7 major religions. By doing that, what Pope Francis is doing, it's his responsibility to set the principles for the new 2,000 years cycle that's starting up again. And as he's doing it, by assuming responsibility for this, he'll just be brushed off into history. The hostile takeover is going to be harder for him to do it now. But nevertheless, my project is the faith of the Pure. The idea of, I've channeled a book with St. Malachy about the first principle of the Olive Pope, and that is everybody has to function from their own capacity. You cannot get your life by grabbing for power. If the people who are looking at Francis and saying he's the last pope, we have to control this, or he's the first pope and now he's dealing with the persecution, the hostile takeover, the attempt to control what he's creating. We don't want to unify the world's religions. We don't want to do that. But the idea of grabbing for power, the faith of the Pure allows everybody to fulfill their purpose in life, to function from within their own capacity. And it takes the 7 major religions and makes it possible for everybody who's relying on other people to help them with a cash flow and a financial foundation to do it based on their own capacity. So we're looking at this idea. Pope Francis, Jorge Bergoglio, is not responsible for calling his people sinners. Basically, that's what they are. They're coming from a sense of lack. They're coming from a sense of the power games that they're playing. One of them is the game of lust, and the other the game of anger, and they're part of the act of revenge. So who else, if these 2 games are based on the game of revenge, what other games are there? There's the game of pride, which leads to war. There's the game of genocide. Envy leads to genocide. Massacres. Greed leads to massacres. Lust leads to slavery and human rights violations, and it's based on illusion. And anger leads to acts of terrorism. So we have to address the two power games that are based on revenge, lust, and envy, leading to genocide and slavery. Those are based on weaving an illusion. Francis is not going to be able to outsmart people who think they can outsmart him by doing this. If he stood up and said he's assuming responsibility, he doesn't have to come up with the solution from himself. He's going to have to turn it over to me to do that, and this idea of the plan for world peace. Because the first thing we're looking at is the exit strategy for Iraq, and how revenge works and why it doesn't work. We're back to this whole idea that the Catholic Church, I don't have my thing here, someplace in here, how revenge works and why it doesn't work, and how you collapse your power base by getting revenge on an innocent person. So at this point in time, I'm going to just say that Pope Francis is innocent of what he's being accused of doing. And the reason for it is because he's the first pope of the new cycle. There's always two popes at the end of the cycle and two popes at the beginning of the cycle. One of them is the principles and one is the application of the principles. So you maybe I'm the person who basically explained the principles of this idea of unifying the world's 7 major religions, taking Catholicism to the next level, and then allowing him to be the application of this, because I don't have any power other than what let's say God gets the glory and I get the responsibility for it. So I basically have no power other than what God has given me. And when I do what's in everyone's best interest to solve problems, then God gets the glory, and I always get responsibility for the things that don't go right, because I'm imperfect just like everybody else is. Okay, so I know this sounds totally outrageous to a lot of people, but as a prophet, my spiritual name is Suzerain de Melchizedek, and I've told you this, that Melchizedeks are like Green Berets or Navy SEALs that go into a situation and raise up the energy. So whether or not you believe that I'm the Pope or I'm stark raving lunatic for declaring that I am, basically it's my job to deal with this, and somebody who's crazy is not going to uphold the idea of unifying the world's 7 major religions and the idea of the Catholic Church in America. And the reason we can do that is because we've been, with the idea of terrorism, is because we have been separated from major acts of terrorism now, and we can address it without a lot of personal emotional attachment to it. Okay, we've had some experiences like 9/11 and such, but we don't have the same emotional attachment like somebody in Israel would have, or somebody dealing with the Palestinian situation. All right, so this morning I woke up and I'm working on a book that addresses the principles of, as if I was a priest, a cleric, I'm going to say, in the Catholic Church, which basically I'm not a Catholic. I was never raised in the Catholic Church, but I'm teaching the principles in my book of Christianity. I've written books with Jesus. I've channeled books with Jesus. The Faith of the Pure, he helped me. He did a chapter, you could say, on that. So my job this morning is to do an idea. I started out, I got enough insights on how to do my book, and that's what I'm going to do tonight, is work on my book on addressing the principles of Christianity that can be taught in like the overview idea of Christianity that can be taught by the clerics in the Faith of the Pure Ray, and then they can teach when to the people who are coming through and want to learn how to create the life they want, one of our unalienable rights, about the unalienable rights that we have from our Creator. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about tonight, is the idea of Francis. Pope Francis is not responsible for charging people with as sinners, calling people sinners. I can do that from the standpoint of the idea of revenge and hostile takeovers, and then deal with this idea. We're looking at a very big structure here. I told you before that there's this big body of knowledge that I'm responsible for teaching, and then the next people to come in will also have a big body of knowledge. So people who are Christians and want to be part of this idea are going to be looking deeper into this idea of hostile takeovers and what it means to be dealing with hostile takeovers, and how you deal with them and what you do with them, and then how to find a sense of balance so you can go forward and then start to address this next body of knowledge. Or if you just want to be a student at one of the Faith of the Pure Ray schools, based on with the international government, in conjunction with the international government, then you can just skip right through everything and just become an immigrant and then go someplace and create your life. If you already know, it doesn't really matter how deeply you dig, as long as you are creating the life you want. Because the Catholic Church in America has to do with creating a sense of prosperity in the world again. We're looking at prosperity, we're looking at unification, unifying the world's 7 major religions and creating a sense of prosperity for the world again. Okay, and if anybody wants to argue with that, you can go ahead. I'll take you on. I'm working on my book, and you can read my book, and if you don't like it, hey, you can figure out another way how to create the life you want. It probably won't work I know it won't work if it's based on revenge, because you're facing God, the creator of us all, says, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So in other words, it's like, let's say there's a line where we've reached the end of where we live in God's body, and on one side of it there is God, and there's light, and there's creativity, and there's nurturing, there's love. God is love. Okay, on outside God's body, where you rely on revenge, it's not nurturing, it's not creative, it's darkness. It's the battle between light and darkness. If you're in the darkness, if you're getting revenge, if you're reacting out of fear, grabbing for power, what you're doing is you're facing the backlashes of universal law. We're still inside God's body, but you're not functioning as part of God's body based on the principles and the tools of that. So you cannot create your life by getting revenge on somebody else. There's nobody in agreement. God is not in agreement for you to get your life on that. Benedict XVI was chosen by the cardinals, but that doesn't mean he didn't have God's permission to do that. And that is because the Catholic Church, the cycle was coming to an end, and those prophecies that came about were that he was going to be the in extremis pope. So we are going to look at the in extremis pope, that we can apply the same thing to Donald Trump. We can apply the same thing to Vladimir Putin. He's the in extremis president of Russia. And basically, he's outside the universe, and he cannot get his life by doing what he's doing, by a hostile takeover of Ukraine. When a plan for world peace exists, basically he's breaking international law by doing that. But I'll let other people handle that. People who have the power to deal with that. That's their job, to decide what's universal law or what is international law. and the idea of the Geneva Convention and such. So that's all I wanted to say tonight. This idea of Francis is, he's not responsible for it, so don't hold him responsible. His job is to set the principles, to be the application of the principles of this idea of unifying all the world's 7 major religions, and he's already started to do that. He's going to be, it's very difficult, and that's what I'm going to cover in my book about, and you'll understand what he's gone through because this is something that applies to everyone. The principles of creativity, Jesus taught the principles of creativity, and now we're going to go deeper into those ideas so that the clerics, from their perspective, can understand this, take these principles and apply them, like the father, the mother, and then the children of the church will be the people who actually listen to both God's law and the principles of this, and then the mother application of this, and then the children will be anybody who wants to go and to learn how to create the life they want. A school that allows everybody to create their life based on fulfilling their purpose in life. Okay, that's it. So thank you for stopping by. Thank you for liking and sharing and subscribing, because this is interesting. A lot of people will be fascinated by this. Thank you.